Parenting time is the time you legally are allowed to see your children after your divorce. You obviously want as much time as possible. Don't let anyone take away that time. In this video, we'll discuss what you need to know in order to protect your rights. Divorce can be heartbreaking, especially if you have children. You're not going to see your kids every day like you do now. A judge is going to decide how much you can see them and when. You have to come up with a schedule to see them on the weekends, holidays, birthdays, and school vacations. It might seem like the deck is stacked against you, but you have important rights when it comes to seeing your children. We can help protect your rights without costing you a fortune. Together, we'll work to make sure you see your children as often as possible. First, let's talk about child custody, because parenting time is very closely associated with child custody. So there are two main types of child custody. There's physical custody and legal custody. There's a difference. Legal custody is basically where you make important decisions for your children, such as educational decisions, healthcare, religion, and so forth, all the important decisions that are made for your kids growing up. Physical custody, on the other hand, is where your children spend their time. At whose house do they sleep most of the time? Even if your spouse gets sole physical custody, you still have the right to reasonable parenting time, unless for some reason the court finds that you are dangerous to your child. In that case, you may have to get supervised visitation. What is parenting time? Well, parenting time is what used to be called visitation. It's when you can legally see your children. You'll have to come up with a parenting plan. That's essentially a schedule. You'll have to come up with which days you're going to see your kids and when. You'll have a weekly schedule as well as a weekend schedule. A typical schedule is every other weekend and with 1 or 2 nights during the week. You'll have to also come up with a schedule for holidays and vacations. Typically, holidays are swapped every other year. So one year you get to be with the kids on Christmas, the next year your spouse gets to be with them on Christmas. The best thing to do is to come up with your own schedule if you can work with your spouse. The court must still approve your plan, but as long as it's reasonable, the court is most likely to go along with it. How is a parenting plan decided? Well, as with everything involving children in the probate and family courts, the best interest of the children are the guiding principle the court uses. The court will look to several factors when making that decision. The first is the age and needs of the child. Then, the physical and emotional health of the parents. Third is the child's relationship with each parent. Fourth is the ability of each parent to provide for the child's basic needs, including food, clothing, and shelter. Number 5 is the ability of each parent to make decisions regarding the child's education, medical care, and religious upbringing. Number 6 is the geographic location of each parent's residence and the distance between them. Transportation can sometimes be an issue when it comes to parenting time. The issue becomes who picks up the child and who drops off the child. This is particularly important if you and your ex-spouse live far away. Who's going to pay for the cost of the transportation and who's going to be responsible for taking the time to make that trip? One general rule is whoever is getting the child transports. So for instance, if you're picking up your child for the weekend, you would be the person to transport the child. If your spouse is getting them back after the weekend, they would come and pick up the child and bring them back to their home. When do you decide the parenting time schedule? The first time you address it is during your divorce. That'll come up during temporary orders. Now, temporary orders are orders from the court that are in place during the course of the divorce itself. It'll be there until there is a final order. But be very careful with temporary orders. They can influence the final order the judge imposes. If your children are getting into a routine that's working for them as far as parenting time, the court is less likely to make a change as a final order. There are special issues and problems that can come up in parenting time situations. Before we take a look at that, we want to let you know that if you go to affordlaw.org/checklist, you'll find a checklist of the most important things you should be considering during your divorce. How is parenting time affected by restraining orders? If there's a restraining order that says you have to stay away and have no contact from your spouse or ex-spouse, that can be a big problem when it comes to parenting time. The question becomes, how do you even communicate with your spouse about the children? One way around that is to ask the court to modify the restraining order so that you can text your spouse about the children only. Your spouse generally has to accept that as a modification. If there is a stay-away order, you won't be able to drop off and pick up your kids personally. You'll have to have a third party do that. So perhaps one of your parents or someone that's suitably acceptable to both yourself and your spouse or ex-spouse can do the pickup and delivery. Even if there's no claim of abuse against your children, the court may still be concerned. If there is a stay away, no contact with your children, there's no parenting time at all. Sometimes the court will order supervised visitation. Supervised visitation is where there is a third party present when you are visiting with your child. It could be a friend or family member that's agreed to by your spouse, or it could be a professional, such as a social worker or clinician. If there is history of physical abuse or substance abuse, or if the child is unsafe in any way, the court will order supervised visitation. Now, supervised visitation isn't ideal, but it can be a step towards unsupervised visitation in the future. Parenting time and child support. These are two separate issues. A parent cannot deny you visitation if you're not paying child support. In the reverse, you can't stop paying child support if your ex-spouse is denying you visitation rights. The kids have a right to see both parents and to be financially supported by both. Parental alienation is a big problem. Basically, that's when you're speaking badly of your other spouse to your children. It creates negative feelings in the child against the other parent. This could be consciously or subconsciously. You're mad at your ex. That's understandable. But don't let that affect your children and their relationship with the other parent. It's harmful to the children. And beyond that, it could be grounds for contempt of court and can affect your custody rights as well as your parenting time. When one parent relocates, that can cause problems in the parenting time schedule as well. If a parent moves out of state, that's called removal. But even within the state, that can cause problems, especially if the two of you are far away. Before a parent can relocate out of state, they must have the court's approval. They should also get the court's approval if they're moving far away from you. Distance changes normal parenting time schedules. It makes frequent visits difficult. Oftentimes what happens is fewer visits but longer visits are ordered. Can I change a parenting time schedule? Well, child custody, child support, and parenting time are always modifiable or changeable. In order to do so, you must show that there has been a significant change in circumstances since the last order was in place, and the change that you are proposing is in the child's best interest. Spending time with your children is probably the most important thing to you, and it is to your children as well. To be good parents, we have to be present for our children. That's why it's so important to have someone fighting for your rights to see your kids. For more information on Massachusetts divorce, please see our next video.